criticism without a suggestion is reserved for publicists, not political leaders. What did Lenin offer in return? What mechanism was supposed to ensure real and not formal power of the people? The answer is tips. But before we talk about the Soviets, we must understand why Lenin was so dissatisfied with the main institution of bourgeois democracy, the parliament. In his work, The State and the Revolution, he gives it a scathing characterization. According to Lenin, parliamentarianism is not an instrument of the power of the people, but a special system to deceive the common people. He writes that every few years, the oppressed classes are allowed to decide which representatives of the ruling class will represent and repress them in parliament. The parliaments themselves, as he pointed out, have become talking points, the main purpose of which is to create the appearance of work, while the real state work is done behind the scenes, in chancelleries, in staffs, in ministers' cabinets. Instead of this system, Lenin proposed to rely on the organ created by the workers and soldiers during the 1905 revolution.
Граждане министры Временного правительства, именем Военно-революционного комитета, ну так что тихо, объявляю ваше Временное правительство арестованным. Это вы Тихо, граждане, тихо, ничего страшного нет. Совершайте пролетарская революция, ваши документики.
What was their fundamental difference with the parliament? First, the Soviets were conceived not as legislative bodies, but as a working corporation. They had to simultaneously issue laws, enforce them themselves, and check their implementation. That is, they combined both legislative and executive power, eliminating the bureaucratic gap between word and deed. Secondly, it was a power that came from the bottom up. Deputies were elected not by territorial districts, but directly in factories and military units. These were people from their own background, whom everyone knew. And third, and this is perhaps the most important democratic mechanism, the right to recall a deputy. If a deputy stopped expressing the will of his or her constituents, or failed to do his job, he or she could be recalled at any time and replaced with another one. And this created a constant, living control of the masses over the representatives. Let's draw an analogy with today again. How many times do we hear about lobbying when a large corporation, pharmaceutical or weapons, spends millions to convince deputies to pass the law it needs? In such a system, a deputy becomes more dependent on his sponsor than on voters, whom he will not see until the next election. The council system, with its right of immediate recall, was designed to make this impossible. Thus, for Lenin, the power of the Soviets was not the abolition of democracy, but on the contrary, its highest form, direct, effective, and controlled by the people. But to establish this new power and protect it, a clash with the old world was inevitable.